They shoot the shit. They shoot the shit. Shoot, 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 shit, shit, shit. Shooting the shit with Chippa.
This is part one of my interview with Ryan Morrison, writer, editor, and executive producer of the film Arctic.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Shooting the Shit with Chippa. This is episode 4, and I've been hyping this a little bit, but trying not to completely go crazy. But tonight I have my first guest from Hollywood, my first guest that makes movies and has made a movie that, if you're lucky enough to be in one of, I think, the 250 screens that it's playing on, you've either seen or will get to see the film that my friend here made. So my guest tonight is Ryan Morrison. He's the writer, editor, and executive producer of the film Arctic, which is in theaters now. It stars Mads Mikkelsen, and I'm going to botch this name so Ryan can help me, and Maria Thelmer Smardatur.
Smardatur.
I have my company works in Iceland a lot, and I still can't handle the names. I can't get them right. But no, that's awesome. She was great too, so we can talk about that too. The film's in theaters now, like I said. It's playing. Is it still in over 200 theaters, Ryan?
Yeah, we actually hit 300. And then I think now they'll probably start pulling it. It's been in a few theaters for about a month, so they'll start dropping now.
Nice, that's awesome. So yeah, if you are listening to this podcast and haven't seen the movie, I'm sure we'll get into spoilers, so I'll say spoiler alert to start it up. Please get out and see it if you can, and if not, when it is available to stream or buy, please support it. It's a hell of a movie, and I'm not just saying that because I know the guy that made the majority of it. So a little background before we get into this, just full disclosure. How did I get a guest like this? Well, Ryan and I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, where I still live. A large city just north of Boston. We both attended Sacred Heart School, a Catholic elementary school in Lynn. Ryan was a year behind me. Our group of friends spanned both years, so pretty much everyone I hung out with the year before. So there's only about 25 or 30 kids in each class anyway. And we spent the majority of our time hanging out at my neighbor Carrie's house, lived right across the street from me, goofing around on a giant trampoline and listening to the best of the mid to late 90s pop songs. It sounded like the Captain Marvel soundtrack back there. Dave Matthews Band, Hanson, Aqua, Spice Girls, just to embarrass us a little bit more. And Ryan and I crossed paths again. I left from 7th to 9th grade and went to a Catholic high school, and then ended up getting out of there, thankfully, and ended up in 10th grade at Lynn Classical. And then Ryan and I crossed paths again. But after high school, I lost touch. Facebook eventually keeps us all together, but I figured I'd begin our discussion with catching up and figuring out, how do we go from Lynn, Massachusetts to Arctic, Ryan?
Well, I had one small correction. You said this is I'm a guest from Hollywood, and I am a guest from Lynn, through and through, all day. I've been in LA for about 7 years, and I lived and grew up in Lynn my entire life. Even after high school, I went to college at UMass Amherst.
Oh, cool.
And
I wasn't sure if college it ended up being a West Coast thing.
I went to UMass Amherst, and then I pretty much exhausted every class that they had for film and television, either production or history, all of that stuff. I got my start in video when I was 12 on the trampoline in the backyard, just like you were just talking about, and making funny videos with my friends, and just playing around. That was kind of what I got hooked on, and I couldn't stop. And we started making videos for, if there's a bake sale at school, that's an excuse to make a video. Yeah, let's put a video up on the morning announcements. And I used to go to school early so that I could work at the school news, so that I could run camera or do the switching or whatever. I used to love that stuff. So I was doing that. I mean, we didn't have the kinds of technology that you have now at the time. We didn't have phones or, laptops that were super accessible to be able to do video editing. So, we kind of just had to use whatever resources we had. I used LinCam, which is a local public access opportunity for it doesn't have to be kids. It can be for anybody that wants to just learn how to use equipment and go out and shoot something. So I did that for a while, and then I went to UMass. I did as much as I could in terms of what they had to offer for classes, and then I got into the game, the real world game after college, and I was just grinding, doing. It was 2007, 2008, and there was just not a job in sight to be had. It was a pretty brutal market, and you had to learn how to do everything. You couldn't just be like, oh, I'm just going to try to survive off of an editor's as a freelance editor.
Right.
You had to be able to be like, oh, you know what? This job requires motion graphics. Yeah, I can do that. And then you take the job, and then you're looking at tutorials online while you're trying to figure out how to do the job. And that's actually where I met Joe Penna, my writing partner. I met him at a job outside of Boston, and we always say, if you took all of the creative minds in Hollywood and tried to concoct the most ironically awful torture job for a creative person, you would come up with the job that we ended up meeting at, which was we were editing medical DVDs back.
God.
Back in Boston, yeah. And it was just utterly, and it wasn't just medical DVDs, it was the same medical DVD every day. It was supposed to be like a custom medical DVD that, like, it had your doctor on it. So we were getting doctors from all over the country, videographers had these doctors read this script, and we had to edit the same exact thing over and over and over again. And it was ironic torture because I love editing, and I hated that job so much.
My buddy Mike, for a quick aside to add to that, he was in sound recording technology, and he says if you ever want to end up hating something you love, pick a song for like a final project in sound recording technology, because what they made them do is break down and separate the master tracks and re-edit. And he goes, I listened to Hey Jude by the Beatles so many times that if that song comes on the radio, I get PTSD and start shaking.
For me, it was Here Comes the Sun. I had to do a promo video for this festival, and they had different people sing Here Comes the Sun, no one singing it on the same tempo or in the same key. And then I had to cut them all together to make it as if it was one song, and it was an absolute nightmare. Those are the good days. You're bringing back a lot of good memories from my freelance days.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, have you stayed in touch with Melanie Patton? She's
Facebook keeps, as you said, Facebook keeps us all in touch that way.
After I saw, or after we made this happen, I was thinking about getting in touch with her. She works local, but she's been on tons of I think she's like in the lower ranks, like the key grips and the thing. You're just running the gamut, right? Moving the way up. But she's been on a whole. I think Joy, which they filmed in stuff like that. Yeah, but just another cool aside. So you met Joe. You were editing medical DVDs.
Oh right, yeah. So I met Joe. We were editing medical DVDs. It was an absolute nightmare, and we'd always sit at lunch and talk about, like, someday we're gonna get out of here. And Joe, this is around 2007, and Joe had started a YouTube channel, and this was before YouTube was just like deeply embedded in the culture. And and it was just like this funny sounding website, and he started getting some following on it, and started being able to. He won a few contests here and there, and it was an opportunity for him to be able to start making some money. So he ended up moving out to LA, and I ended up getting a job at a commercial production company in Boston, and I would just kind of sit at my editing suite in Boston, and I would see I'd see all these awesome YouTube videos that Joe was doing, and he was getting, millions of views, and he was making a living doing it. And I was cutting commercials, which again, it's a great way to make a living, but there's not a whole lot of creativity that goes into cutting a commercial. If you're cutting a commercial for a sandwich shop, they're talking about a turkey sub, you show a turkey sub. Like that's
Woohoo! And it's not going to be a very good looking turkey sub because you didn't get to film it.
No. Yeah, so it just is like, it's a job. So I did that as much as I could. And then I came out to LA for Joe's wedding and saw what his life was like, and I fell in love with it. It was just like I was so proud of him, but also like so
jealous.
honest, super jealous, so jealous. But I was really, really proud of him, and then an opportunity came about for me to start documenting the stuff that Joe was doing. His company was growing, and he needed someone to shoot behind the scenes. And that was something that I had a lot of experience.
That's a cool gig.
Yeah, it's a very cool gig. I had done a lot of that for the Celtics, and I was looking for an excuse, and I was in a point in my life where I was like, I'm either gonna be a company man here, and I'm gonna try to make my career and try to get the big clients, the Dunkin' Donuts, the Subways of the area, or I can go and take a job for less money. I don't know anyone out there other than Joe, and I will not have health insurance or a place to live. And I talked to my family, and my dad actually kind of pushed me over the edge and was like, I can always come home. That was what he said. And he said, you can always come home. But if you don't go and you don't try, you'll regret it. And
Right,
I was
then
terrified.
If you don't go and you don't try, then you never did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was scared. I was scared as hell. But I sold my car, quit my job, and I left a week later because they needed someone quickly. So there was not a lot of time to make any decisions, and I took off and I started documenting what Joe was doing. And for those of you that don't know what the channel is like, it's called Mystery Guitar Man, and we've got just under 3 million subscribers and about 400 million video views, and we do a lot of crazy editing, very musical. A lot of animation, a lot of stop motion, and you don't need to speak English to understand what it is. And I think that's what gives us such a great international appeal.
Right.
Because Joe's from Brazil. So I was documenting how he was making these videos, but I also, every time I would see him working on something and I knew how to do it maybe easier, or there might be a better way to do what he was doing, I'd always kind of just chime in. And I just pretty quickly went from documenting it to participating. And Joe's a great partner because he just respects a good idea. He doesn't care where it came from. There's no ego involved with working with him. So, it wasn't like, oh, you're the behind the scenes guy, you should just be filming us figuring it out.
Yeah. Stay here.
Yeah,
I've got someone else to do that job.
Yeah, there was no stay in your lane kind of mentality, and it wasn't long before I just became his go-to editor, and I was doing all the visual effects for the channel, and then we just hired someone else to document what we were doing, and then we wanted to start telling bigger stories, and we wanted to start doing some narrative stuff, and we made a few short films, and we wrote them together, and we found that we had very complementary way of looking at the world. There's a lot of common ground that we have, but there are also some strengths that he has and some strengths that I have that we both bring to the table together, that may be different from each other, but we have this alchemy and this, we've been doing it together now for 7 years. So, we've got our own secret language, and, we started doing some short films and having the channel as a place to, be as a platform to get those out into the world. Was really, really helpful. And it's funny because the channel did not have any effect in us getting Arctic off the ground.
Really?
Yeah. It's funny because you would think a lot of times our agency or our managers or people that are kind of working in the business, they'll look at the channel, and the channel's very spastic and very crazy. If you were to look at the channel and then look at Arctic, you'd be like, how did the same people make these two things? Because Arctic is very slow and stark and really heavy, and the channel is yeah, and the channel is super like ADD. It's done in 2 minutes, and it's just crazy. And we just happened to run into a friend that knew some producers that had ties to Iceland, and Joe and I had just written the script together. And that was the fresh topic on our minds. So when asked, "Oh, what are you up to?" We said, "Oh, we just wrote this script." And then she asked if she could show it to her producer friend that had connections to Iceland. And this one guy had connections both to the production company in Iceland, to a finance company here in Los Angeles, and to an executive producer that knew Mads Mikkelsen, who was in Hannibal. And it was just like this crazy coincidence that we gave them the script, and it seemed that everybody that read the script, it just kind of hit the sweet spot, and everybody liked it. And it's weird because it's an unusual movie. There's not a whole lot of dialogue, and it feels like it's a hard sell to get someone to want to put some money behind. It seems like an easy decision in retrospect when you have Mads Mikkelsen, like top tier performer, doing it. But when you're just trying to sell it with words on the page, I thought it would be a lot harder of a sell. But we got a lot of support right off the bat based on what we had on the page.
That's awesome. So you talked about writing it. What was the inspiration for the script?
The inspiration for the script was we had written another script, and we had taken it around town, and it was too expensive. We had never made a movie before, and nobody wanted to spend $15 million on a first timer. Nobody wanted to risk that. And Joe and I kind of set out when writing it that we knew he was going to direct, and I was going to edit and produce. And we have no leverage in that world. If we were going to try to make a YouTube thing, that's a different story. But
right.
Yeah. So we went out and we brought this script around town, and it just seemed too steep for people to want to take a chance on us, and that totally makes sense. So we were like, okay, well, we got to write something a little bit smaller, and something that'll be more realistic for us to produce. And we started thinking about what is universal, what is something that everybody can relate to. Because we always kind of look at the channel like that too. How can people understand what this is without using dialogue? And survival was was like this. Everybody understands what that is. Everybody's got to eat. Everybody gets cold. Everybody gets hot. We understood what that was. And Joe had seen a fake movie poster on Reddit for a movie called On Mars, and it was just not a real poster. It was just a subreddit for people that made fictitious movie posters.
Right.
So we started kind of messing around, looking at that image and joking, and then started getting more serious about what story would actually take place that would warrant this poster. And we ended up coming up with a story that was very, very, very similar to what Arctic is. And we pitched it to our agency, and they were very supportive, but also were like, hey, you guys should check out this trailer for a movie that's coming out soon that Ridley Scott is making with Matt Damon, and it's called The Martian. And it's a survival tale on Mars that was very, very similar to what we had written. So, and it was Matt Damon and Ridley Scott. How are you going to compete with that? So... yeah, so we took that in stride, and we said, okay, well, let's go back. We don't have to go back to the drawing board. Let's try to move it. And Joe is Brazilian, and he hates the cold, and I'm from the Boston area, and I love the cold. So my first instinct was to go somewhere cold. I felt like that'd be an awesome backdrop for the story that we knew we wanted to tell. And I Googled some images of Iceland because that was what came in my head right away. And Iceland in the winter is an unbeatable landscape. It's just an incredible looking place. It's It looks beautiful and terrifying at the same time.
Right. It ends up being, an equally as powerful, second character to the foil to Mads, right? In the movie. It's
Yeah.
just like, it's weird when scenery can be a character, right? It doesn't happen often. And,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, we went out of our way because we said Joe and I don't really like, we call them mustache twirling villains. We don't like bad guys that are bad just to be bad. We like them to
Right.
kind of either have a good point or to have there not be a bad guy. Maybe the antagonist is the situation. And that's what we went with for Arctic, and that's what Iceland so graciously gave us. Was this very brutal environment. And what's actually funny is that it's a movie called Arctic. It's supposed to be man against the elements. It's supposed to be cold. It's supposed to be icy and snowy. And we flew out to Iceland right as we were about to shoot, and there was no snow. It was completely barren. And we're like, what's going on? So we talked to some of our locals, and they said, oh, it's been the driest winter that Iceland has ever had. And that was super problematic for us because we didn't have enough money to go chase the snow somewhere else. So we were freaking out. And about 3 days before we were supposed to start shooting, Iceland had the highest recorded snowfall in Iceland's history in one day. And it was 3 feet of snow. So Iceland smiled upon us to give us a second chance at being able to make this movie.
Wow. That's nuts. So the script, changed locale. How much of the script as it was written, I love the way the movie kind of just drops you into his situation. So many disaster movies or movies of survival feel they need to have a ton of backstory, like a guy getting on a plane and, having like a letter from his wife and, he's been away for a while and he has to come home. And I love that the movie dumps you into his situation, goes through his day to day of how he's surviving. And then the reveal as the story's going along and he's trying to, get to safety with the lady who's been horribly mangled in that accident.
Mm-hmm.
You realize that that's not even his crash site, right?
Yeah.
He gets back to like the first place or maybe the first place he was at. And I love that the movie only gives you glimpses of like who he was and where he's coming from. And that makes the character stronger, in my opinion, rather than, having it fully spelled out for you and kind of seeing him in the world he was in before he got there. It makes it very universal, like you said. And the fact that, English isn't even his first language. You hear him kind of when he's like talking to himself a couple of times in, completely other language. I just found that cool. How much of that was, 100% your vision of the script? Did Mads add anything to that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the bones of it was similar, very, very similar, from when it took place on Mars. A lot of the, there's the impasse at the big hill that he has to try to pull the girl over. That was part of it. There were other things. I don't want to spoil anything quite yet, but there are other things that wouldn't necessarily be on Mars that could only exist in the Arctic.
Yep.
But that was something that some of our producers lended their suggestions on the script part, where they'd be like, oh, I feel like we could use a little bit more excitement around this part of the story. And then, Joe and I, now that we had a better sense of what the movie was going to be, knowing where it was going to be, we could adjust. But then as far as Overgaard's character, he was always supposed to be an outline of a man. He was supposed to be someone that people could pour their own backstory into.
Right.
And we wanted to hint at stuff, but when it's important with a movie that's as quiet as this movie is, as far as dialogue is concerned, that you need to you have to create these things we call little mysteries. And you have to make the audience lean in, because if it's a lean back, just watch things happen kind of situation, you're gonna get bored. If nobody's talking, yeah, it's gonna lose you. And even with this approach, there are some people that it's not for everybody. But we felt like making him an outline was the best way to go. And then once we spoke with Mads, I mean, we didn't even have any idea that Mads would be interested in doing this. We thought he was, he's too big for this. A lot of people recognize his face. They say, "Oh, Casino Royale," or Doctor Strange, but they don't necessarily know his name in America. In everywhere else, he is a huge, enormous star. We didn't think that we were going to be able to get him, and then he brought such beautiful insight to the character, and he really magnified what we had on the page. So he got it. Like, he understood. We don't want to know. We don't want to know these things. He kept calling it memory lane. He was like, we don't want to go down memory lane. It's important that we're in the moment. And
Right.
And you had mentioned earlier, just dropping you in. Making the choice to just drop someone in as an audience in on somebody that it kind of is in media res, but it's not, because we're establishing that this is his life. Usually in the first 10 minutes of a movie, you're just trying to establish what someone's life is. His life just happens. Our story starts after the crash. And what's important too there is that the idea that we all have this glossary of knowledge. We've seen it in other movies, and we've seen it done really well. And that's not to say that it shouldn't be in other movies. It should be. It has been in other movies for a reason, because those movies it was warranted. In Castaway, which is a huge influence on this, and in All Is Lost. We see when things go wrong. Because that's where that movie and that's where that story starts. But our story starts after that, because we've seen that already and we know what that looks like. So then you can just imagine, and then people start wondering, well, how long has he been there? We see that giant SOS and it's enormous, and then we see it from far away and it's still just another speck. And we're wondering, how long has this guy been there? And is he gonna? I don't know if he's gonna get out of there with that sign. So we felt like that was a choice. That was something that we had written in. It wasn't like, oh, we wrote in a plane crash and then couldn't afford to shoot it. We had written it in that way, and that was actually one of the deciding factors that made Mads really interested in doing it. He was like, oh, well, this is different. We were trying to do something different. So that's a very long-winded way of answering your question.
Well, it is different. Like you said, it's a very familiar genre. It's very universal, right? But there's not the way you've described writing it and the way you've described it, as being something that could almost be dropped into any survival situation really rings through, because it's a very unique feeling movie, even though you've been there, done that. Like in my mind, I'm going, okay, I probably know where this is going. And instead of me caring necessarily that I probably knew where it was going and what was going to happen, I cared more about the exact moment. Like you said, when he comes to that impasse and he has to carry the girl up the hill, you're 100% there with him, right? You're not thinking about what came before and what came after. You're only thinking about, I'm watching, a person in desperation, trying to deal with this. And, there's just so much nuance to that. Like you said, little tiny ideas like I absolutely loved and almost got emotional in the theater. And that's, a hard thing to do with a movie with such little dialogue and such little backstory. When he first brings the girl from the plane crash, from the, the helicopter that was going to save them, into his little camp. And he's, got her kind of in stasis, got the bed ready for her. And before he puts her down in the bed, he gives her a hug and has this look on his human contact. Like, I haven't had this. And it's like, this is a moment just for me. And instead of that being kind of weird or creepy, you completely get why he needs that hug.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't, it's just the eyes, the facial expression, it just completely blew me away on a performance and a subtext. level, right?
Yeah. I mean, Mads and Maria really
Um,
did a great job. They, we had written that moment in, and I don't think any of us knew how strong it was going to be until we saw them do it, because, uh, Mads's face is just, it says it all, and just the context of that moment, it really makes people think, oh man, wow, that really, I think, drives it home. You can have the notches on the map that say how many days he's been there. You can have the the big SOS sign, but I think the thing that really drives it home is him getting human contact and how starved he looks for it.
right.
Um,
Human contact, stranger that doesn't speak the same language as him,
yeah,
that he can barely communicate with. He doesn't know if they're even going to survive. And then
yeah,
he finds that picture of her family and like has to have that with her. Like
hmm
it's not like she's asking for it. It's just, he's projecting probably his own situation or something onto it. And it's just it says so much without saying a goddamn thing. And it amazed me. And the duality of that scene with the scene from later where he believes that she has died, right?
hmm
And it says, "I'm gonna leave you behind," and like he makes that decision, and then I'm sorry, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
Jesus. And so to backtrack a bit, only
sure.
because
There's
this is
always a
how I
lot
do.
to there's a lot to unpack in this, because
No, dude, and
there's
you're
no
you're
dialogue.
giving me great material to go off of here, man. I'm really glad. I'm early on in learning how to be an interviewer and everything here,
Oh, all
and this
good,
is
dude,
going.
all good.
So so you said, how did the team come together? Like it's you and Joe. You got the script. You talked about kind of how it got picked up. When the script got to a person at a production company, but what else happened there? Like how did it grow? How did it kind of blossom into getting to Iceland that first day and start filming?
It
You
was
know,
dicey. It was dicey. Joe and I were YouTube kind of changed how you can make money on the website, and they changed what kind of content
yes, they did.
was being put up for, on the front page, or being supported and being advertised the most. And our kinds of content is very difficult. It's excuse me, it was difficult to produce. It might take us 3 weeks to do a 2 minute stop motion video. And whereas someone might do have a gaming channel, and they can hop on, and it's more about the personality.
Right.
And they can kind of hop on and play a game. And that's not to say that that's not work. It's just you can make so much more of it, so much more of that content, so much faster. I mean, you play a game for an
It's
hour.
education content.
Yeah. And those guys work hard because they have to do 5 videos a week, and sometimes you might not want to play a game, and you might not want to be funny, you might not want to be on, but you got to do it because that's the job. And for us, it takes us a lot longer to make a smaller amount of content, and YouTube was just leaning very hard into longer stuff. So Joe and I were actually about to, like, we were in the interviewing process of getting day jobs, because we weren't going to be able to succeed on YouTube anymore, and we were going to have to pack it up. We had closed our office. We had sold all of our equipment.
No.
Um, yeah, everything got sold on Craigslist.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and we were working out of Joe's garage. After we had sold our office, left our office and sold all of our gear, so things were looking pretty
What's that?
dire.
Like 2016.
That's 2016, yeah. And things were dire because there were four of us, and we had to let go two of our. I mean, when there's only four people in a company, you're all friends. So telling two of your friends, "Hey, we can't do this anymore," was really, really hard. And Joe and I were just like, okay, we're gonna figure out day jobs, and we're gonna take one last Hail Mary at this Arctic movie, and see if we can get this one off the ground. And if we can't get it off the ground, then it's working for an ad agency, or working for Google, or taking some sort of tech job, because it wasn't sustainable on YouTube anymore. So we were in that's the frame of mind that we were in, and that was when we happened to meet that friend that knew somebody that knew somebody. And we took a meeting with a financier, and they were really, really cool. Had some interesting notes that really improved the script. And that's what you look for in a producer. You look for somebody that you don't want to be at odds with. You don't want to be fighting with somebody over the checkbook. You want to be, you want to have partners that are going to make something better. So we found those guys, and then it was a matter of getting Mads on board. The guys in Iceland, the production company in Iceland, they're the guys that do Game of Thrones.
Yep.
They were on board, but we needed to actually have the money. And in order for us to trigger the money, we needed to have Mads, or someone of Mads' stature. And we didn't have that person. And Joe was given a 15-minute Skype phone call with Mads to convince him. We managed to, our friend that knew a friend that knew somebody that knew Mads said, hey, there's a very small script, because Arctic's very short, that's on your pile. Put it at the top of your pile, and then the director wants to meet with you. So Mads read it and then gave Joe 15 minutes to basically convince him, so that me and Joe didn't have to go get day jobs, at least right away. And Joe jumped on a Skype with him, and I've never been more proud of my buddy and happier with his approach to being a director, because they got on that call and he answered all of Mads's questions in such a way and with such readiness and such confidence that by the end of the call, which was originally scheduled for 15 minutes and it ended up being about 3 hours.
Of course.
Yeah. By the end of that call, Mads said, I think I'm going to start growing my beard, and we'll have our people talk. And we were about a week away. We had I think we had 2 more days before our go no go date, where it was like, okay, well, the movie's not going to happen if we don't get it by Friday, and this is on a Wednesday, because we needed to time everything out with the winter of Iceland. He pulled it off. We got a call on a Wednesday that was like, the movie's greenlit. We need you in Iceland by Friday. And Joe was, Joe's married and has a 2-year-old, so he was like, I need the weekend, just to give his wife
say sorry the whole time.
Yeah, just to give his wife some kind of leg up in that. And his wife Sarah is the absolute best. She's just like, she's the third partner in this partnership, because she's such a huge support. We packed our bags and we headed out to Iceland on Monday, and then landed with no snow. so
off to a great start. So is that when you landed in Iceland, is that the first time you met Mads and the cast in person?
Yeah, that was the first time we met Mads, and we went with an entirely Icelandic crew, because the way that the tax incentives work is that if you're hiring people from the local country, they'll give you a break on the expenses. So we ended up hiring all Icelandic crew, and they were absolutely stellar. I couldn't speak more highly of those people. They knew all of their jobs, top tier, high quality level, and then not only that, but they knew how to do their jobs in the snow outside all day.
Right.
Which you just can't beat, and you can't compete with that.
So I always look at the technical side of movies is my thing. I know the directors, the cinematographers, the editors' names like the back of my hand. Like, that's my shtick, and I know that less than actors. I always try to think about, when you're looking at a shot, what does it look like behind the camera? When you're looking at that shot. So how big was the crew? Like, you're there.
Our crew was probably we fluctuated between about 30 and 60 people at any given time. Most of them, a lot of the money on this movie was spent on everything behind the camera, like you're saying. Usually the mantra is, we want to put the money on screen, But in order to get us out into the middle of nowhere, we needed giant trucks that had wheels that were as big as I am, and they would inflate and deflate like because of the nature of just driving on ice because we weren't near roads. So we were just like out in the middle of nowhere, and we needed these vehicles, and we had 2 snowmobiles, and we had to be lean and mean because there was no, okay, we got to move 120 people. Like that's just not possible. So our crew was pretty small. I mean, I got to give a special shout out to Ani, our sound guy, because he was the only sound guy. Like our sound department was one guy, and our post-production sound guys could not stop raving about what a great job this guy did. And he did it by himself. So it was like,
That's wild.
yeah, it was a small crew, and they all hustled really, really well, and really hard, and they all really, truly, truly believed in the movie. Most of our heads of department actually flew themselves out to Cannes when we premiered in France, because they wanted to be there for it. It wasn't just another job for them. They really were proud of what they worked on, and they really cared a lot.
They should be. I'm going to say that a lot through this, but if anyone else who worked on the film hears this thing, which little giddy old me hopes they do, I really mean it. You could tell it was a labor of love. You could tell everybody put their all. And like you said, you spend that money behind the camera instead of quote unquote what's on screen. But if it makes what's on screen that resonant and work that well, I mean, I'm not the only critic or person that's seen it that's saying these things, right? It's
sure.
It's doing very well. So
yeah, we're really proud of it.
it should be, dude. I'd be proud of if I even was involved in making 30 seconds of that thing. So man, so Matt had called the movie the most difficult shoot of his career. I heard this in a quote. Anything, because obviously, I don't have Mads on here right now. Wouldn't that
Sure.
be freaking cool? But could you elaborate on that at all? Is that, like, because you're out in the middle of nowhere, right? Like you said, we're, even on the technical side, on the acting side, I mean, were you waking up in a hotel and driving out the middle of nowhere, or were you, passing out in a bunker, waiting for the next day to film? What
bunker is closest to what we were dealing with. Yeah. So for Mads, I've talked to Mads directly about the set length, and I've heard him answer a question similar to that before. And so number one, I just want to say Mads is the hardest working guy I've ever met. That dude was just he didn't care that we didn't have the budget that Star Wars Rogue One had. We didn't have the budget that Doctor Strange had, or Casino Royale. He's done some giant movies.
Oh yeah.
And he kept calling this rock and roll filmmaking, and he was just so excited. He was so excited to do this and to really get to flex and to really test himself as an actor. And I think honestly one of the hardest things for him, sure, there's the environment. It's cold, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult to get to. But I think that the hardest thing for him was at the beginning when he didn't have anybody he kept calling it to play ball with. He just was alone, and he felt really isolated, which was good because we needed that. But as a performer, I think a lot of people that watch movies or watch a lot of TV don't really understand that there's this rat-a-tat, there's this action, there's this energy that comes from 2 people playing off of each other.
Oh yeah.
And you see it in live theater a lot, and you can feel it. You can feel it there. And that's what you feel on set. And Mads didn't have that for a very big chunk of our production schedule. So he says that his
basically dealing with a paralyzed person in their
sure.
eyes.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
He said that it was magic. It was magic when she finally arrived. And Maria, to her credit, a lot of people might look at her role and they'll see, how hard can it be to just lay down for 3 weeks? But the most important thing is that they were giving each other energy to work off of, and she was giving Mads energy to play against, and a lot of his fantastic performance comes from him having another person right there that he cares so deeply about, and Mario was so important to creating that energy. And actually, one of the things, so they have like this little hand squeeze that they do to communicate with each other, because they don't speak the same language, and that's something that they came up with as actors. That wasn't written into the script. So for them as performers to really take it seriously, and for Maria to really not be like, I'm just essentially the volleyball here. For Maria to be more than that, I think some of that gets lost on some people that are more cynical when they look at her performance. But I think that was that extra degree of magic that we needed for the audience to care, and for Mads to care.
I want, like, just as you said, Mads is the everyman, or not the everyman, but like the blank slate man to like put yourself onto. Like, you don't watch that movie as Mads is surviving. You watch that movie as you're right there with him. I want to know, and that's my favorite. I like movies the most when they lead me wanting to know more, and not like in a that they're badly written way, but in a, oh man, I could spend another year with that character.
They always say end a movie. You'd rather end a movie too soon. You don't want to overstay your welcome.
So I want to know who in Mads' life, who in Overgaard's life, is he supplementing Maria for? Do you know what I mean? Whose face is he seeing? Who is he? Where's his loss? The person he hasn't got to see, in forever. Because that's how I always felt about that. Is like, because she is only really able to communicate with emotion and with human contact, and without, the things that we're more used to, the dialogue, he kind of creates a relationship there of the mutual beneficial, they're there living for each other. He has something to live for again, because you kind of get the feeling that he was, not saying that he was giving up, but with the fish catching and everything, he was surviving.
He wasn't living. That's the thesis.
Yeah. How long can you go on like that, right? And how close was he to give up? And everything, the new map, so he has more of a stretch. How was it as a writer? You said how long was the script, Ryan? When it
So I think a script is something that a lot of people, even people that are kind of just have a cursory knowledge of what the industry is like. You look at a script and you say, it's about a page a minute, and that's usually the rule.
When it's dialogue.
when there's dialogue. This script is a script that probably Joe and I are the only people on Earth that could have read it and known how long the movie was going to be, because our AD on Arctic would always say, in Gone with the Wind, there's one line that says Atlanta burns, and it's 2 words, and it could be a sequence that's 45 minutes long. Because it's Atlanta burns. It's being burned down in the war, and we had to look at our script, and we had to know, okay, this one line is going to take us 5 minutes, and this 3 pages of description is going to be one shot. So our script was probably, I think the first draft of it was probably around 70 pages. Typically a feature is going to be between 90 and 120. When we, wanted to make our producers a little bit more comfortable with it, and make sure that we kind of had it paced out better on the page, I think the script that we ended up shooting was somewhere around 82. But it was very friendly white space, like very easy to read, because there was, there's only so much you can do when it's like, okay, he's walking again.
But so then as a writer, you've got this vision in your head, right? I mean, I've written stories. I'm more the visual. I'm more the filmer. It's amazing to read a script and work with somebody else and kind of have you describe what you think they're writing, and have just one other guy tell you, "Oh my God, you get it."
Yeah.
What's it like to see actors, again, who you went from doing this YouTube stuff? Is it safe to say that Mads is the biggest actor you've worked with so far? No,
Uh, yeah.
or
In fairness to the other actors, because I've worked with a lot of great actors that may just not have the financial success that Mads has had,
yeah,
or the
no,
box office success, I should say.
exactly. But I have to curb myself too, because I've been telling
Sure.
people, you hear this guest that I'm going to have, and it's like, shit. Am I just going to make everybody else I've had feel like crap at this? But
Yeah.
that's what I mean in saying, you went from quick YouTube and smaller concept narratives to this, you know, like you said, very different than what you were doing before, kind of
Oh,
thing.
sure.
So
Yeah.
to see two actors add something to your story, like that hand squeeze, right? Like, you even have time. Like, obviously, you said this was like, how long did it take to film this thing?
19 days.
So do you even have time to process that?
Definitely. When we were done.
Or you rock and
Yeah.
making, right? So you're kind of like bouncing off of each other and leading off of each other's energy, right? So, but
Yeah,
like,
you kind of immediately become peers, and you have to. You can't have too much reverence, because you got to get to work. You guys are working together, and you can, totally compliment each other and all of that business after. But we kind of like the very first time I met Mads, we were sitting in his hotel. One of the few moments that we were indoors and warm throughout this entire process, and he looked at me. And Joe had gone to the bar to grab a drink, and Mads looked at me, and we were going over a scene, and he looked at me and he put his hand on the table and he looked me right in the eye and he goes, "It's gonna be okay." And I was like, "Holy shit!" Because he was just saying the line from the movie, and I was like, "It's like a handful of words, like who?" And it's like it barely is anything. It's barely a thought, but it also at the same time I knew the context, and I looked at this guy and I believed it, and it was the truth, and it was a unique thought coming from this person that actually came from me, and it was really surreal because I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna be good. Like he's gonna crush this." So I felt really, really confident that, and then him just super deeply understanding who the character was. It was surreal, and it just made me feel really confident that we were gonna make a good movie. And I was really excited because I had never done anything like that before. I'd never had anybody, of that level even read a script of mine, let alone say, "You know what, I want to put my career on the line right here with yours." And and then at the end, when we were done shooting, I'm also the editor, and I said to Mads, I hope I can honor the performance that you've given us because it was absolutely outstanding. And he grabbed me by both shoulders and he said to me, I I have the utmost confidence, and it's never even been a second thought to me." And he grabbed me and he said thank you so much. He thanked me. He said thank you so much for letting me bring this character to life. And and we have like a special friendship now and a special bond. He got to meet my parents at the New York premiere, and he just he talked me up to my parents, which I thought was pretty cool, because they had never seen all this glitz with my YouTube stuff. So it was surreal. I think something that might even supersede that as being surreal is the fact that I sat down when I got to set, and I saw an airplane in the middle of a field, like a snow field, and it looked exactly like it did in my imagination, and there wasn't like a crane around, and there were no trucks. It was just a plane in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, this is here because it was in my imagination like a month ago.
Yep.
And it just totally blew my mind. Like I was like, somebody put this airplane on a ship and they sent it over to us, and then we reassembled it in the middle of nowhere. I'm doing my best not to curse because this is like it was really unbelievable. I just
Anchor. We
Yeah.
luckily somehow haven't yet, but you can.
Yeah. Well, it blew my mind, man. It was just unbelievable to see an airplane out in like a crashed airplane out in the middle of the Iceland wilderness, and I was like, well, how am I here right now? And then other people believed it.
Standing up, dude, over this stuff. This is so cool.
Yeah. Couldn't believe it. It was nuts.
So that actually brings me to a good question. So did you guys? This all happened real quick, like you said. So was there like location scouting that happened before you got there, or did you guys get to Iceland and then kind of go around and go like, because obviously the location scout is something that happens.
Yeah.
Were you guys just there and going, okay, yeah, we got a few days. I guess we're shooting that here,
Mm-hmm.
or did that?
I gotta give the credit to Einar, our locations manager. He does a lot of that for Game of Thrones, and this dude is just a beast. He knew all of these places that were going to. What's funny about Chris? I'll send you sometime. I'll send you some of the behind the scenes video, because what's really interesting is
that would make my world, dude.
It's absolutely nuts, because there is these spots that Einar found for us, and it's like we always needed to be close to the road, because we basically shot in two locations. One that was about 40 minutes outside of Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland, and then the other was about 3 hours into the Highlands, which was not accessible by road. So this place that was about 40 minutes from the city, which in Iceland, if you drive about 5 minutes out of the city, you're in the middle of nowhere. But if you go 40 minutes out, there's this area where we it's funny, you look to your right, and this is 4 different scenes of the movie, and you look to your left, and that's 4 or 5 other scenes of the movie, and then you turn around, and any direction that you point the camera, it's now an entirely unique environment. And I just happened to be going through some of that old footage recently, and I looked at it and I was like, oh yeah, those 2 things are right next to each other, but in the movie they feel like they're like 100 miles apart from each other. But it's just, you just need to look left and you'll see awesome.
It. Behind the scenes is my favorite part of this kind of stuff. Please, after this, go when you have a chance and look at that stuff of the movie. I think it's Ithaca Morns is the movie we made, the zombie movie. But we have an hour or some crazy amount of behind the scenes footage that I put up of that movie that like I hadn't watched in 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever, or like, so I'm sitting there watching it, and the cool thing is we filmed the movie in black and white.
Nice.
And the behind the scenes is all in color.
So wow, yeah, that's cool.
Makeup and everything that we did in it, and it just, and I can, whether it's 15 years or whether it's just, right after a 19-day shoot like that, I can just imagine going back and looking at that and having that time capsule even more than having the movie, right? Having that time capsule, putting yourself in the moment.
You have been listening to part 1 of my interview with Ryan Morrison, writer, director, and executive producer of the film Arctic. The second half of this interview will be available in a couple weeks, so stay tuned.